Good evening, everyone. Welcome to California Today. I'm David Zhang. Here is a look at some of today's top stories. Amid the tropical storm, another migrant bus arrives in LA from Texas. The mayor now criticizing the Texas governor's action. Southern California now cleaning up the mess Tropical Storm Hilary made. A meteorologist shares more on the storm's impact. The Roman Catholic Archbishop files for bankruptcy in San Francisco. The church cites hundreds of child sexual abuse lawsuits. A ninth bus of migrants arrived in Los Angeles from Texas. This time, the mayor criticized the Texas governor for sending it during the tropical storm. Meanwhile, several governors banded together, calling out the president over the border crisis. NTD's Eileen Ang has more.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass slammed the Texas governor for sending families with toddlers towards Tropical Storm Hilary. In a statement, she said, "If anybody understands the danger of hurricanes and thunderstorms, it's the governor of Texas, who has to deal with this threat on an annual basis. This is a despicable act beyond politics." The bus departed from Brownsville, Texas on Sunday as city officials warned Angelenos to brace for the peak impact of the storm. It arrived at LA Union Station Monday evening. This comes as the city voted in June to be a sanctuary city for immigrants. Overwhelmed at the border, Texas has been sending migrant buses to more liberal cities like LA and New York. This is the ninth migrant bus that has arrived in LA. On Monday, the Texas governor and 4 other governors held a press conference in Eagle Pass, Texas, responding to the open border policies.
Every state in the United States is a border state. Sure, it's Oklahoma, it's all the way to South Dakota. You heard Kim Reynolds in Iowa talk about it. Look at what's going on in New York. Look at what's going on in Illinois. They may be Democrat governors and Democrat mayors, but they're fed up as much as Republicans are with the Biden administration and the way that Biden is destroying our states and our cities and our country. Americans will not tolerate it anymore.
Abbott claims President Biden is responsible for thousands of migrant deaths. In response, 25 states are supporting Texas to secure the border. The influx of migrants came after Title 42 expired in May.
As Tropical Storm Hilary takes her leave, she leaves behind a city in need of serious tidying up. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
Cleanup operations are in full swing across Southern California as communities work to recover the aftermath of Tropical Storm Hilary, which brought historic rainfall to the region. National Weather Service meteorologist Richard Thompson tells us the last time a tropical storm hit Socal.
This is historic. This is the first landfalling tropical storm in Southern California since September 25th, 1939. So it's been a few decades since this actually last occurred. So definitely a very rare occurrence.
Thompson says as the storm continues to move northward, it continues to weaken to a point where it's a post-tropical depression.
Hilary formed, it became a strong category 4 hurricane. Then as it continued moving north, over the coastal waters there, it gradually weakened. And by the time it came onshore at the Mexican border, it was a tropical storm, which means like wind speed or wind gusts between 39 and 74 miles per hour.
The storm barreled through the city, flooding streets, triggering mudslides, and leaving thousands without power. The rain unleashed record-breaking downpours overnight, which dumped more than half the average annual rain on some desert and mountain areas. The Los Angeles Fire Department responded to more than 1,800 storm-related calls for service.
Yes, there was a lot of just like it was flooded like crazy up to the sidewalk and stuff. Like we had a sandbag part of our house in front of our house and stuff like that.
Well, we did receive. You look at the rainfall totals across Southern California. Coastal areas received upwards of 4 to 5 inches. In the mountains and deserts, you had upwards of some areas in excess of 10 inches of rainfall. So with that much rainfall in such a short period of time, there were many reports of flooding.
As Los Angeles starts to dry out following the heavy storm, there have been no reported deaths, serious injuries, or significant damages in the state so far. Christina Corona, NTD News, Los Angeles.
San Francisco might see fewer driverless vehicles now after multiple driverless crashes. Cruise agreed to cut its Robotaxi fleet in half in the city.
Cruise, the autonomous vehicle created by General Motors, agreed to cut down its Robotaxi fleet by half in San Francisco. This comes as authorities investigate 2 recent crashes in the city.
The data that we're getting is from 911 calls, which have tripled as a result of autonomous vehicles doing crazy things.
The DMV said Cruise agreed to have no more than 50 driverless vehicles in operation during the day and 150 at night. San Francisco is the first major U.S. city with 2 fleets of driverless vehicles competing for passengers, after the Public Utilities Commission allowed Cruise and Waymo to operate driverless robo-taxis throughout the city at all hours, despite safety worries regarding unexpected stops and erratic behavior.
When an autonomous vehicle impacts one of our company's ability to respond to an emergency incident, it can impact someone's survivability.
In a span of 1 week, according to the LA Times, on August 11th, a group of robo-taxis drove together in SF, froze in place for 15 minutes, blocking an intersection, then drove on.
I couldn't have predicted it any better. I don't think any of us could.
Another incident was when a Cruise vehicle reportedly entered an intersection as a fire truck with sirens on approached, resulting in a collision. Greg Dietrich, Cruise's general manager in San Francisco, said that its vehicle identified the emergency vehicle almost immediately when it came into view and identified a risk of a crash and braked, reducing its speed, but couldn't avoid the collision. At that intersection, visibility is blocked by buildings, and it's not possible to see objects around a corner until they are very close to the intersection, Dietrich's statement said. The Cruise autonomous vehicle detected the siren as soon as it was distinguishable from background noise, he wrote. Cruise vehicles have driven more than 3 million autonomous miles in the city and interacted with emergency vehicles more than 168,000 times in the first 7 months of this year alone, according to the statement. The company plans to work with authorities to reduce the likelihood of crashes happening again.
In San Francisco, the Roman Catholic Archbishop filing for bankruptcy, citing hundreds of child sexual abuse lawsuits. The suits come after a California law was passed to extend the statute of limitations for child sex abuse victims. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
The Archbishop of San Francisco announced on Monday a filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy to, quote, manage and resolve more than 500 lawsuits alleging child sexual abuse. The lawsuits come after California Assembly Bill 218 passed into law, which allows claims that previously would have expired under the statute of limitations. San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone said in a press release, quote, it is the best way to bring much-needed resolution to survivors while allowing the Archdiocese to continue its sacred mission to the faithful and those in need. The press release also says that the overwhelming majority of the alleged abuse cases occurred more than 30 years ago and involve priests who are deceased or no longer in the ministry. It also says a number of measures and resources have been put in place over the years, such as victim counseling services, background checks, and an independent review board consisting of an abuse survivor, psychologist, 2 physicians, a retired police officer, and others. The Archdiocese serves San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo counties with a Catholic population of 442,000. Also in California, both the Oakland and Santa Barbara Archdioceses filed for bankruptcy this year, also citing financial challenges from hundreds of sexual abuse lawsuits. In Rome, a child abuse prevention panel put together by the Vatican for the entire Catholic Church is estimated to have its first report in 2024. Reporting from San Francisco, Jason Blair, NTD News.
We'll now take a short break, everyone, but here's what we have for you when we come right back. Controversial state bills could be harming both children and parents, according to a lawyer. She shares her thoughts on the bills making their way through the legislature. Another school district considers requiring schools to inform parents if their child wants to change genders. 6 professors suing the state over diversity and equity training requirements. I hear from the lawyer representing the teachers. Those stories and more coming up on California Today. Welcome back to California Today, everybody. I'm your host, David Zhang. Controversial bills to indoctrinate children and separate them from their parents. That's what some parental rights activists are saying while protesting the bills moving through the legislature. NTV's Jack Bradley has the story.
An increasing number of Californians are protesting several bills that they claim would strip parents of their constitutional rights to raise their children without state intervention. Nicole Pearson, attorney and founder of Facts, Law, Truth, Justice, mentioned 4 bills that are of particular concern, the worst of which, she says, is Assembly Bill 665. That's authored by Democratic Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco and Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo of Los Angeles.
If a professional person deems your 12-year-old to be mature enough, he or she can leave home for any reason without any notice to the parents and check themselves into a government-run or funded or affiliated residential shelter. That is probably the most egregious bill. We call it the state-sanctioned kidnapping or state-sanctioned runaway bill, and it's basically facilitating children moving out of their homes for any reason. Right now, the way the law is written is 12-year-olds can only leave home without notice to their parents, like literally in the dead of the night, or if they go to school and a counselor realizes something's wrong. They can only leave home if they're the victims of abuse, incest, or a danger to themselves or others. For example, they want to kill themselves or their parents or their sibling or their teacher. Absolutely, we want to remove those children from a dangerous situation and we want to move them into a government shelter. But what Senator Scott Wiener and Wendy Carrillo want to do, are remove those requirements so that any child can move out of their home at any time and move into a government shelter, which we know will open up a CPS investigation, will make them wards of the state, and by default, again, separate them from the parents, and if you don't have the time or the money or the resources, will ultimately end up terminating your parental rights. It's a very, very dangerous bill. So that's AB 665. And another horrible bill authored by Senator Scott Wiener is Assembly Bill 957. He and Assemblywoman Lori Wilson wrote that bill, and that bill, again, towards breaking up families, says if there are 2 parents who are separating and are fighting over custody, the parent that is affirming the child's gender identity will be the favored parent, and that will actually make law that affirming a child's self-selected gender identity with no age limit. So any child, in fact, Lori Wilson used the example of a 7-year-old. If your 7-year-old comes home, you must affirm their gender, because affirming a child's self-selected gender identity is in line with their health, safety, and welfare. If both parents do not affirm their child's gender identity, then they will both be found to be jeopardizing or acting contrary to that child's health, safety, and welfare, and both will risk losing custody.
Then there's Assembly Bill 1078, which Pearson says would take local control away from school boards.
It says school boards can do whatever they want. However, if you do whatever you want, then and it doesn't align with what the state is requesting that you do, you could be defunded, you could be fined, you will be publicly doxxed. Board members who object to the state recommended, they always do recommendations, the state recommended curricula, and we've already seen that happening. We've already seen Tony Thurmond come down to local school boards. We've seen Rob Bonta, Gavin Newsom open up an investigation of the Temecula Valley Unified School District. They were, when they were threatening to not adopt Gavin Newsom's and his wife's curriculum, they opened up an investigation. They threatened to fine them $1.5 million, and the school district backpedaled and are now working with the state to find a compromise about the curricula. So then we have Senator Portantino's bill, SB 596. This bill was actually drafted in response to the Glenvale Unified School District that I don't want to call it uprising, but that movement of parents, that pushback of parents in Glendale. And that bill criminalizes parents, or anyone who speaks up at a school board and disrupts the school board. You could face up to 1 year in jail or $1,000 in penalties and fines. So we have the perfect storm of trying to either take your kids away, and if we can't take your kids away, we're still going to indoctrinate them, still going to fill their heads with ideas that pit them against you and try to alienate them from you. And if you have the gall, the gumption to try and stand up for yourselves or your children, then we could throw you in jail. I mean, this is as authoritarian, and Marxist and communistic as you get.
Pearson suggested that these bills presume that parents who are unsupportive of their children's identity or sexuality are bad. But a fundamental principle of this country is that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that parents won't abuse their children if they don't affirm their identities.
Auntie D reached out to Senator Winner and Assemblywoman Carrillo for comment. We asked about allegations of stripping rights from parents in the bills mentioned. We did not hear back. Should parents know if their children try to change genders? More Southern California school districts now considering informing those parents. The Orange Unified School District became the latest to consider the controversial policy.
The Orange County School District is the latest to consider a controversial policy that would require schools to notify parents if their child wishes to identify as transgender. The policy appeared as a discussion item on the August 17th school board meeting. The new rule would require schools to notify parents in writing within 3 days if their child identifies as transgender, is involved in violence, or shares thoughts of self-harm. Under the policy, parents would also be notified if their child requests to use names, pronouns, athletic programs, bathrooms, or locker rooms that don't, quote, align with the student's biological sex or gender. Currently, the California Department of Education requires school districts to keep private such changes relating to students' gender status from parents or guardians. The 7-member board and a crowd of parents, teachers, and community members debated whether it was the parents' right to be notified or if the policy would put some students' safety in danger. A final vote on the policy is set for September 7th.
6 community college professors suing California over its requirements to include diversity, equity, and inclusion elements in their courses. I spoke with a prosecuting attorney on how the lawsuit came about. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, representing the 6 plaintiffs, alleged that the California's new Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, or DEIA rules, force professors to teach the government's politicized viewpoints that they don't share, and that violates their First Amendment rights. I spoke to the plaintiff attorney, Daniel Ortner. Thanks for joining us. So, Daniel, are these state DEI rules mandatory? Do they carry any penalties if professors don't abide by them?
No, yeah, this is mandatory. It's required for new hires have to have these competencies. They're regularly evaluated for their adherence to these DEI requirements. Whether they're teaching and preaching against anti-racism and intersectionality to their students, whether they are endorsing these concepts, embracing race consciousness, embracing an equity mindset, they're told they have to do these things. They're also told what they cannot teach. For instance, model principles the district put out warns professors against weaponizing academic freedom. It says, warns them against that, and it says it warns them against inflicting curricular trauma on their students, which is just an absurd concept. What does that mean to inflict curricular trauma on a student? Speech is not trauma. Ideas are not trauma. Students are adults. They should be expected to handle different ideas.
I noticed that 2 of the plaintiffs, they're not political science teachers, nor social science or history. They're actually chemistry teachers. How are they affected by the state's policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so they're also being told that they have to introduce DEIA concepts into their classroom, even though they teach chemistry. So it's wildly inappropriate. The chemistry classroom and the chemistry laboratory are not places to preach about anti-racism and intersectionality, and so they're being forced to take away from their students' education by introducing these concepts that have no place in the classroom and are irrelevant and damaging to their students.
So is this going to be an uphill battle for you? Because by definition, if someone is going against anti-racism, wouldn't that person be automatically labeled as a racist?
I think, what we're really clear in this lawsuit is we're in favor of free speech, ultimately. That's the point, is that professors should be free to share their viewpoint when they're teaching in the classroom. They shouldn't have to only stick to one side that is the state-approved side. FIRE, where the organization, the nonprofit public interest law firm where I work, we have a lawsuit against Florida's Stop Woke Act, which is on the other side of the aisle. That in there, Florida banned very similar concepts like anti-racism, intersectionality, these same concepts in the classroom. We got an injunction in Florida against that law because the principle is the same. Free speech is what is needed. Viewpoints, the government cannot discriminate against viewpoints based on the ones that they like or don't like. They can't choose winners and losers in the marketplace of ideas.
I just couldn't help but draw the comparison between DEI policies with the theory of evolution, because some biology professors who hold a strong religious faith don't believe in evolution, they believe in creation. How's this any different?
So, of course, let's say a biology classroom. The curriculum can say that a professor has to talk about evolution. We're not disputing that. The difference is when you go in and you say the professor has to talk about it in a certain way, has to endorse certain concepts, can't offer a counterpoint, for instance, offer the case for intelligent design for the students to consider. That would be the analogy. Here they're saying you have to teach and preach intersectionality, anti-racism, DEIA viewpoints, and you cannot introduce other concepts and teach your students both sides of an issue. So that would be the analogy, would be banning the professor from teaching and talking about different perspectives, and that's not acceptable.
All right, Attorney Daniel Ortner, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on our program. Now let's check in with NTD's Tyler Castillo for our sports roundup.
Thank you. I'm Tyler Castillo, taking you through California Today's Sports Roundup.
The 49ers recently played their second preseason game where they faced the Denver Broncos at home. Brock Purdy started the weekend game for the Niners. Purdy looked calm and collected when he was 4 for 5 for 65 yards. In the second half, Trey started where he has improved significantly since last preseason game on releasing the ball immediately. Lance had a 5-drive touchdown before it got called with an unnecessary celebration penalty on Brandon Ayuk. Lance was 12 for 18 for 173 yards and a touchdown pass. The 49ers won the game with the last-second field goal kick by Jake Moody, putting the Niners up by 1 point with a final score of 21-20.
I'm Tyler Castillo, and that was the Sports Roundup for today. Back to you.
Thanks, Tyler. All right, everyone, that's all we've got for you tonight. We would like you to join us again on California Today every weekday at 8 p.m. Make sure to check out our broadcasts at ntd.com/California-today. You will find all of our top latest clips there, ready to share with friends and family. Send us a message on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Gunjin World, or through our email, california.today@ntd.com. If you'd like to share a news tip or let us know how we're doing, we'd love to hear from you. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.